Okay, let's move on then to Iran. And the UK has decided to put sanctions on Iran's Prosecutor General, Mohammad Jafar Montazeri. Well, this is all coming as a result of the execution of this man at the weekend. That's Alireza Akbari. Now, he is British, or was British-Iranian. He served as Iran's Deputy Defense Minister between 2000 and 2008. And he was arrested as a spy for MI6 in 2019, was convicted and sentenced to death, and that execution was carried out over the weekend. So we just put him back on screen there for a second. James Cleverly had some words to say. He said the Prosecutor General is at the heart of Iran's barbaric use of the death penalty for political ends. Sanctioning him today underlines our disgust at Akbari's execution and our commitment to holding the regime to account for its appalling human rights violations. Now, no matter what we think about the death penalty or whatever, the fact of the matter is the Iranians decided that they had evidence for him being a spy, and part of that evidence was apparently payments of 1.8 million euros on one case, £285,000 in another case, $50,000 in another case, amounts of money that probably are beyond most Iranians. So apparently he had no explanation for this, and in fairness to him, he, however, always denied his alleged activities. Now, I just wanted to remind everybody that, of course, Britain has been operating within Iran for a very long time, and one of the sort of famous cases recently was Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. Sorry. Now, she was subsequently released, having served time in prison in Iran and under house arrest in Iran for allegedly interfering. Subversion, I believe, was the main allegation against her. Now, this was related to her media activities with Thomson Reuters Foundation and the BBC Media Action. And if you remember, this is Monique Villa from the Thomson Reuters Foundation, who said at the time that the charges were linked to her work at BBC Media Action and the Thomson Reuters Foundation. This is a complete invention, as the Thomson Reuters Foundation doesn't work in Iran and has no program or dealings with Iran. It was mainly her work with BBC Media Action that was the issue here. But if you remember, Boris Johnson, who was Foreign Secretary at the time, had this to say: when we look at what Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was doing, she was simply teaching people journalism, as I understand it, at the very limit. But we have been, and Brian has been, talking about the activities of BBC Media Action in countries right across the world: Iran, Syria, Kazakhstan, all kinds of places, there to foment regime change in these countries, and Ukraine as well, absolutely. So, you know, there is clear evidence of British involvement to bring about regime change in Iran. Now, let's just look at this report here from Media Landscapes, talking about Iran and talking about media development organizations in Iran. And they said that BBC Media Action used to work in media and communication in Iran through training and long-term mentoring. At the moment, it's no longer operative in the country, and Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, a dual British and Iranian citizen, is currently in jail in Tehran because of her previous work with the organization. She'd been sentenced to 5 years in prison for allegedly plotting against the Iranian government. That will continue with this. Now, of course, she was released following massive intervention from the British government. But Consortium News here was back in 2021 talking about leaks, illustrating in alarming detail how Reuters and the BBC, two of the largest and most distinguished news organizations in the world, attempted to answer the British Foreign Ministry's call for help in improving its, quotes, ability to respond to and promote our message across Russia, and, quotes, to counter the Russian government's narrative. Among the FCO's stated goals, according to the director of the Counter-Disinformation and Media Development Program, was to weaken the Russian state's influence on its near neighbours. So, you know, evidence all around the place of the activities of Thomson Reuters Foundation and BBC Media Action, not only to push British and Western narratives into those countries, but to counter Russian narratives as well. And finally, just on this final reminder, Juliet Harkin, formerly BBC Media Action, talking about Syria, talking about them working in 2004 with individuals within the Syrian ministry who wanted change, tried to get them to be the drivers of that change, and saying that all media development work has been done in Syria has, in my opinion, been predicated upon the idea that there can be change from within. you have an authoritarian regime, and you find who the reformers are within that, and you work with them. It's quite an incredible.
This is subversion.
Total subversion. So
it's got a gloss over it, but it's subversion.
So, David, it's always tragic when somebody loses their lives, but our reaction to that, of course, has been to impose more sanctions and effectively carry out economic war on the country.
Yes, and this is where we actually do need more information from what's happening inside Iran, because the British government's attempt to manipulate things, which seems to be global, I don't think there's any country really which escapes their overview, is one thing. And the actual internal dynamics within Iran and the pressures that are building up because of what is, in many regards, a very nasty regime doing very nasty things to the people, to what is a inherently forward-thinking and quite modern people. It's not the country of Iran, the people of Iran are not what they're advertised to be on the Western media. The pressures that are building there are very substantial. So to get a proper insight in this is very difficult because of the lack of free media, either there or here. And this is an area we're going to have to concentrate on, because we need to know what's happening in this large and populous and important country. And we can be sure the BBC won't tell us.
Well, it's interesting you say that, David. I can't say how or why, but we should be getting some reports from the ground in Iran within the next week or two. So watch this space.
We'll see what happens. Yeah.